Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. Our story today takes us to a remote region of the Northeast Kingdom, a stretch of wilderness in Brunswick, Vermont, known as the Silvio Conte National Wildlife Refuge, Nulhegan Basin Division. A few weeks during the summer, UVM students spend time studying various species of birds like the Cape May warbler and the indigo bunting. And as we'll learn, trying not to anger the local moose population. Across the Fence's Caleb May got up in the middle of the night to brave mosquitoes, mud, and mountains to bring us this story of how research happens at all hours of the day and night.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living.
As Dolly Parton told us back in the day, the 9 to 5 is the standard of the American workday. But some jobs require a more irregular schedule. It is 4 in the morning, and UVM seniors Vegas Rockefeller and Connor Moses are up adhering to the altered adage that the early birder gets the bird. Their job is to record bird species to help gauge the effects of an ongoing collaborative study headed by Director of the UVM Forestry Program, Tony D'Amato.
Yeah, I think,
And really what that work is doing is taking this idea of, assessing the vulnerability of a forest to changing conditions like climate, invasive insects, and pathogens, and then deciding are there ways that we can actually manage that forest to try to either resist those changes or adaptively kind of respond to those changes.
The project is based on the idea of co-production, which means working with the refuges and forest managers to create specific plans for each site, rather than using a one-size-fits-all model. One of the locations showcases why this approach is so important.
Yeah, the Nulhegan Basin in general is a special place, both ecologically, culturally, very distinctive part of Vermont, and even when we think about the forest types that exist there relative to what we have throughout the rest of the state, you really have, a pretty vulnerable condition, these lowland conifer forests that you might find in small pockets elsewhere, but the nature of the climate in the Nulhegan Basin, you get a lot of cold air pooling, which really allows for these lowland conifer forests to persist, and really represents kind of the southern range margin of that forest type, which is something we get concerned about as things get warmer. Those trees are going to be increasingly facing temperatures that they're not well adapted to.
The basin's history as a commercial lumber production site and its importance mean that D'Amato and U.S. Fish and Wildlife have to create and maintain treatment plans.
And what you're doing is really accelerating what would happen over a 200-year period with gap scale disturbances, creating an opening here, killing a few trees there. Over time what that creates in the forest is just really fine scale variability in habitat conditions and forest conditions. It creates small gaps, it creates thinned areas, it creates areas that never will be cut, and so you kind of have this range of open canopy, less open canopy, and dense canopy conditions.
So how exactly are the birds of the basin responding to the study? Well, that is what Moses and Rockefeller are here to find out.
So here at the refuge, we have 34 treatment units, and at each treatment unit, we have a centroid or central point within that plot that we sit at for 12 minutes and visit that every summer, 3 times within the summer, and we record all the birds we've seen here.
So after the early wake-up, they arrive at the first plot and start the 12-minute timer before the sun even has a chance to rise.
birds are most active, we found between 5 and 6. And the detection rates are highest then. They're singing louder, they're singing more regularly. And so it's important that we are out in the woods looking for these birds when they are most visible and singing.
Each bird calls for its notation on the datasheet, as the air is alive with song. And after 720 seconds and 12 different species, Rockefeller packs up and heads to the next site, while Moses stays behind for another aspect of the study. Rockefeller knows these woods well, and knows what species he can expect at each plot, including some Northeast Kingdom exclusives.
So some of the more rare species, the exciting species that people come to the Nolhegan Basin to see are going to be spruce grouse, Canada warbler, Nashville warbler, mourning warbler, boreal chickadee, blackback woodpecker, Canada jay. Those are some of the exciting species that we see here.
During the summer months, these species rely on the dense conifer forests to raise their young.
We have a Cape May warbler singing right now. They have a really high-pitched, there it goes, song, and they like to sing from the tops of these spruce trees. It's definitely one of the few places that you can find Cape May warblers in the state. They are going to be in other areas that have spruce, red spruce, black spruce, but because we have such a high density of spruce right here in the refuge, this is why we're seeing them here.
But even with his extensive experience, a few birds can still surprise him.
That was like 20 to 30 red crossbills. That was crazy. Red crossbills are a species of bird that feed on the spruce pine cones. So it's an eruption year for them. It's a really good spruce cone production year. So we have a lot of red crossbills here in the basin, and about 25-ish of them just flew over. That's the biggest flock we've seen this year.
However, as a wildlife biology major, birds are not the only thing Rockefeller is tuned into. Some are out of curiosity, and others are out of self-preservation, like the time he encountered a moose.
Connor sees the moose and is like, moose, moose. And she charged at us, running right across this gap. I stand up and look at her, and she's just gunning it straight towards me. And I grab my clipboard and I bang it, and she stops and blew an air horn, and she kind of turned off and trotted away. But we were definitely a little rattled. Moose can be pretty dangerous out here, especially when they're defending their calves. I often tell friends and family that I get chased by moose and bear and count birds in between. So that's the job that we work for the month of June.
Eventually, Moses and Rockefeller cross paths.
Boreal chickadees.
Oh, where?
I think it's still in this plot.
Cool.
Just listen for them. They're going to be...
And while
little
one
bit
has a more
towards the
passive
right.
form of birding, Moses has a slightly more demanding job: tracking and mapping Canada warblers.
So I think we have a Nashville's that's calling. Today I came out here and there's one singing behind me that I followed around for 2 hours, and I went and I took 20 different GPS markers of where this guy was singing, and then we're going to be able to go put that on the computer and look at their territory.
But why would so much attention be brought onto just one bird?
So Canada warblers are declining, and they really, really like these wet, sprucey areas, and these areas are at risk, and so we're looking to protect their habitats, protect the species.
Monitoring the positive response of these birds is hard work, and although he is a dedicated researcher, the allure of bird songs can sometimes prove to be too much.
There's one right there.
Moses and Rockefeller do this work for the month of June, collecting both vital information for the project and valuable experience for themselves.
You know, writ large, any hands-on experience really is so important for giving that real-life context for what they're learning in the classroom, and both in terms of, you know, observing wildlife, observing, you know, kind of how wildlife habitat is responding to forest management, but also, you know, working with those managers and really understanding, you know, how do they view this through the day job that some of these students ultimately want to have.
For Moses and Rockefeller, this is more than just a summer job. Following a particular black-backed woodpecker sighting, we could see Rockefeller's passion shining through.
We were hoping that black-backed woodpecker would respond positively to that treatment and kind of return to these sites and nest in some of these standing trees and feed in the ones that have died. And now that we just got a black-backed woodpecker land on that snag over there is pretty exciting. So that's a first for us here at the refuge and in these treatments.
With a new generation of forward-thinking foresters and wildlife managers, the future is bright for Vermont's forests and our feathered friends that call them home. From Brunswick, Vermont, I'm Caleb May with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Caleb. This research by UVM students is ongoing and expected to last for several years to come. So far, researchers have already seen increases of bird populations like Canada warbler and the yellow-rumped warbler returning to sites where they hadn't been seen or heard before. I want to thank the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX for making our program possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.